We're going on assignment with the Voice of America. On assignment coming to you now from VOA headquarters in Washington, I'm Imran Siddiqui.
And I'm Alex Villarreal. Coming up, a VOA correspondent tells us about the challenges facing journalists in Afghanistan.
Somalia continues a slow move toward normal life. We'll talk with VOA's Gabe Joslow.
In India, taking care of the country's many widows.
And the passing of one of music's cultural icons, a true rock and roll animal.
Don't go away. On Assignment is on the air right now. We begin in Afghanistan, where journalists' independence is said to be increasingly at risk. Activists say a proposed new media law could make conditions even tougher.
VOA Islamabad correspondent Sharon Bain talked to Afghan journalists about the challenges they face and concerns for their future once international forces leave next year. Here's a look at my conversation with her.
They have a very large and vibrant media in Afghanistan. And you have to understand that there are lots of newspapers, lots of radios, many TV channels. Everybody jumped into the media game. So there are TV channels that are funded by pro-Iranian interests, for example. There are TV channels and newspapers funded by warlords. And then there are more, maybe what they would term themselves more independent, who are actually getting a lot of funding from the international community. And that allows them to go out and do more investigative pieces. It allows them to look into things. And I think within all of this multiple media that's available, there is a concern there that once the international troops leave and the international community begins to get bored with Afghanistan, that the aid may drop, and then their ability to be more, investigative and independent will suffer. And there is also a concern that the government will become more and more overbearing, and this is what the activist was telling me, that the government wants to follow more the pattern of a China or of an Iran, where they can actually completely control and use censorship and throw the journalists into jail. And they have, the journalists actually do come under quite a lot of threat. I mean, I have a list right here in front of me of all the journalists who are beaten and detained and threatened and for work that they did. So there is a lot of concern there as to what's going to happen next.
Earlier this year, gunmen burst into these offices of the daily Hashti Sub after the newspaper published an expose of land grabs. Editor Parviz Kawa, whose paper is partially funded with U.S. aid, says things are at a critical point.
We are definitely in a fight. And in the front line of this fight is the independent media. We fight for the democracy in this country, we fight for the civil society, we fight for the human rights, we fight for many other values, internationally accepted values.
So why do you think the Afghan government is making it so difficult for journalists to cover stories?
Well, I think that there's a lot involved there. There's lots of different kinds of media, and less dependent, more independent than others. And I think there's a concern among the Afghan government that perhaps some of this media is not being completely objective, completely balanced, and that they could be inciting problems. So what they've come out and said was, well, we have to have more oversight, we have to have more control, and we need to be able to see what the media is doing. The media's reaction has been, that's just the government trying to clamp down its censorship. It gives too much oversight to the government, that there were not enough media representatives on that sort of the oversight body, that it was being peopled by very specific government appointees, and they felt that it was a threat to them. And they already function under a certain amount of physical threat.
Saliha Soadat reports for Tolo News, owned by Afghan media tycoon Saad Mohseni. Even under existing laws, she has come under pressure from powerful political leaders.
The brother of a former lawmaker raped and killed a girl. I talked to the girl's brother and lawyer, but the accused refused to be interviewed. After that, I got a letter from the existing commission saying I would be questioned.
Tell me something, Sharon. How difficult is it for foreign journalists like yourself to cover news in a place like Afghanistan?
It has been quite challenging to cover everything in Afghanistan. Mostly when I go there, I tend to stay within Kabul. Once you start leaving Kabul, things get very dicey. Some of the roads are no longer safe. You can't really just drive out of Kabul. That's not really that safe. And even within Kabul, there's some areas which are less safe than others. So it's become more and more difficult for journalists to be able to cover things, especially international journalists, that may be happening out in the provinces. And I think for local journalists too, there are a lot of concerns. The female journalists, for example, no longer want to be seen on camera. A lot of them will not be on camera anymore. And there are quite a few, or at least one female journalist that I spoke to who said, she was thinking about leaving her career altogether. So there's a lot of sort of social and cultural and safety pressures, security pressures on the journalist community right now.
VOA Islamabad correspondent Sharon Bain. Now to Somalia, where UN officials say the Islamist militant group al-shabab still poses a threat to peace-building efforts. The al-Qaeda-linked group is not as strong as it was before it was pushed out of major cities, but the militants still control parts of the country.
VOA East Africa correspondent Gabe Joslow recently returned from Somalia, and he talked with Anna Simon's Philip Alexio about the situation in the capital, Mogadishu. Let's take a look.
The security situation has actually gotten a little bit worse. There have been targeted attacks against major United Nations offices, against Western targets, against the Turkish presence there. So it's a much more on edge now and a little bit more concern in the city.
Al-Shabaab still controls large areas of the Somali countryside. So do they have enough forces from the African Union mission to get this job done? Has there been any talk about maybe boosting the forces a little bit more since al-Shabaab has been such a problem recently?
Yeah, I think that right now the AU forces that are in Somalia are a bit overstretched because they spent, they were really successful in taking town after town after town that was controlled by al-Shabaab, but now the problem is trying to maintain a presence in those areas. So yeah, the Somali government, the UN are all requesting an increase in troop numbers. They need a few thousand more to try to take over some of the towns that are still under al-Shabaab's control, which includes the town of Baraway, which is south of Mogadishu. This is the place where U.S. Special Forces conducted an operation trying to catch a pretty senior commander.
And Mogadishu being one of the most dangerous cities in the world, they have been able to build, I guess, street lights, I guess some roads. They're trying to build up buildings, and I guess kids are going to school. Is that right?
Yeah, you're starting to see some signs of progress in that direction. Like you said, street lights are going up in the capital. Roads are improving slightly, but really the institutional capacity of the place is still so minimal that these efforts are really, it's just sort of scratching the surface of the needs in the city. Any progress is good progress, and you're seeing a lot of private investment, which is going a long way, more so than the sort of public, investment or public, works that are taking place there.
And how is the President Hassan Sheikh Mohammed, viewed by the people right now?
The main criticism that you hear from people on the streets, from locals mostly, is that he spends too much time abroad, raising money, trying to find partners for Somalia, and isn't really doing enough to control the political situation at home. He also faces a lot of resistance from some of the regional leaders because, places like Jubaland in the south, Somaliland, Puntland in the north, are setting up their own states, and they're still trying to determine how these states will function within a broader federal system.
It's an interesting story, the artist story that you did with focusing on Adan Farah Afi, if I'm saying that properly. But he's now able, I guess after decades, or at least after a good number of years, been able to now showcase his artwork. Tell us a little bit about that story and about him.
Yeah, Afi's an interesting guy. He, grew up in Mogadishu. He was raised in a Catholic orphanage, which is where he discovered his talent as a painter, and he was encouraged early on. But then as the war broke out, he really had to take his work underground. Somalia during that time was just basically too dangerous to try to express an opinion or anything like that.
Now, given a chance to express himself, there is no topic Afi is afraid of. This painting shows the terror wrought by the Islamist militant group al-Shabab, represented as a serpentine beard burned into the canvas.
So now his work is sort of being rediscovered. There's a group there called the Center for Research and Dialogue, which is promoting a lot of Somali artists, including Afi. And his work it's amazing. It's really, it's very political, it's very topical, it's also very funny.
Yeah, I guess as Afi said, they don't have any natural disasters. They only have they don't have any tornadoes or tsunamis. Just all of their problems, I guess, really have been political, as he said.
Exactly. I really loved that line from him. Yeah, and that's a lot, and the artwork reflects that too. There's pictures of politicians and a lot of war, and people, really finally getting a chance to talk about it.
And finally, I just like to ask you this, and I think I asked you this before the last time, but your feelings being in a country like that when it is such a dangerous place to be.
Well, that's the thing. You take a lot of security precautions when you go. When I travel there, if I go out on the street to report, I usually have a security team with me, which is 10 or 12 guys who are armed, who will follow you around. And if you go out on the street to interview people, they'll set up kind of a ring around you to just make sure you don't get attacked. You don't stay very long in many places. Of course, that also changes the way people perceive you. So it's not the easiest place to work, when you have armed guys around you.
And again, Gabe Joslow is VOA's East Africa correspondent, and he has, of course, made a number of reporting trips to Somalia.
We're taking a break now. When we come back, an ongoing effort to provide for India's widows. You're watching On Assignment. In India's northern city of Vrindavan, some 2,000 widows abandoned by their families and society live in government shelters without basic amenities.
But last year, India's Supreme Court said the women should be given the support they need to live with dignity. VOA New Delhi correspondent Aru Pandey reported on one organization trying to make that ruling a reality. I caught up with her for more. Check it out. Okay, so Aru, tell us, what are the roots of this problem? Why are these widows ostracized?
Well, basically, it goes back to centuries ago. A lot of these women are completely dependent on their husband. Their husband is the primary earner, and once he dies, they really have nothing. So if they don't have kids, they don't have anyone to support them. The ones that often do have children, they move in with their children, their adult children, or maybe they move in with their in-laws, and they're either mistreated or they're basically thought of as a financial burden. So the relatives often kick them out, and they try to find a different, a purpose in life. So they find themselves in this religious city, in this holy city, and they decide to spend the rest of their life in this place.
Sulab founder Bindeshwar Pathak says it's a dramatic change for many women who were cast out of their homes by family members and ostracized by society, often left to beg near temples to survive.
In 10 months, they wanted to die. And now they want to live longer, to enjoy life. They are very happy. So that way, we have brought a change in the minds of the women, because now they get opportunities.
Many of these widows had no way of supporting themselves and traveled from the eastern state of West Bengal to live their remaining lives at Vrindavan.
This plight of these women, how does it reflect India as a paternalistic society?
Well, that's basically what it is. It's a patriarchal society, like I explained. These women are completely dependent on their husbands. I mean, they don't have an outside career. They don't have outside money coming in. The ones that might be able to get some government support or welfare they're illiterate. So they don't even know how to navigate the system. They don't know how to open a bank account. They don't know that they should be entitled to certain benefits. They don't know how to read and write.
Now tell us about the organization that's helping these widows. How did this program come about?
The Supreme Court, a few years ago, was called attention to the plight of these widows. A lot of these widows were begging at temples in Vrindavan because they had no way to survive. And a lot of times when they died, there was no money, there's nobody there to actually perform the last rites or, cremate them. And the Supreme Court heard about the plight of them and was so shocked by some of the conditions that they currently live in these government-run homes, that the Supreme Court asked this particular NGO, Sulab International, and another NGO to, please help out if you can support these widows and basically give them a new lease on life and provide them not just with financial support, but, with training.
From what you know about the issue and the circumstances of widows in India, do you think enough is being done?
Well, I think in that city in particular, Vrindavan, there's, I think, about 15,000 widows estimated, and I think nationwide about 40 million. So it's a huge population, and I think these type of programs help. But again, this NGO right now is only helping about 900 people. I mean, they're trying their best, but it really is, I think, it's partly a societal change. There needs to be a change in the way people view these widows.
And finally, just out of curiosity, how was it that you found this organization and found out about this program?
Well, Salad has been doing a lot of work. Like I said, for example, they've been working in sanitation, making sure that a lot of the areas in a lot of the rural areas in India are connected with sanitation, and they've actually contacted me and saying that, look, we have this new program where we're helping these widows. And just to give you an idea, the founder of this NGO, Dr. Pathak, he's really supporting them with mostly his own money. They don't really rely on donations.
And again, Aru Pandey is VOA's correspondent in New Delhi. Our thanks again to Aru.
We're taking a break now, but when we come back, the passing of an American music rebel. You're watching On Assignment. Legendary American rock musician Lou Reed died on October 27th. The 71-year-old performer had been in frail health in recent months with complications from a liver transplant. Reed's early songs with his band, the Velvet Underground, focused on his home city of New York's darker themes of drugs, sex, and violence. And we're joined now by VOA music blogger Catherine Cole to talk about his life and what he meant to music. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
He just had one song, which was a commercial success, Take a Walk on the Wild Side. How did you think he had such a huge influence?
Well, you say he had one commercial hit, but there were a lot of other songs that people knew him for. I mean, Sweet Jane was a song that got a lot of play on other radio stations, and he was known on college radio stations and FM rock stations here in the United States and in other countries. He had a lot of influence because his music spoke to a lot of people. It may not have been played on hit radio stations, but every kid that picked up a guitar learned how to play a couple of his songs. I mean, that Walk on the Wild Side and Sweet Jane had 2 chords in them. They're very easy to play. His songs talked about pain and talked about being alone and nobody liking you, and the Velvet Underground songs were about the same thing. And what speaks more to kids sitting at home or sitting in their garage starting up a band and playing songs, except nobody likes me, I'm all alone, I'm in pain. So they spoke to them, and he influenced them. They felt that nobody else spoke to them the same way that Lou Reed did.
What do you think his legacy is going to be?
Well, those great songs. I mean, he was one of the leaders in the avant-garde rock music here in the United States and around the world. There really wasn't anybody doing the type of music that the Velvet Underground did when they got started.
Did you get a chance to see them live?
Not the Velvet Underground, but I saw Lou Reed a couple of times in New York and here in Washington. And he was not a smiley, happy guy. He was very intense. You could tell that he enjoyed performing, whether he was up there with just 2 people or he was up there with a full band. It was always an intense performance, and I'm glad I saw him. I saw him walking down the street in New York a few times. I never went up to say hello to him. I was kind of scared of him. I kind of wish I had said hello to him now.
All right. In 30 seconds, if you can just tell us, after his death, we saw this widespread tweets and social media news about him and his legacy, and everyone was trying to remember him. Why does it always happen when an artist like Lou Reed dies, people come out with such an intense protocol?
Well, because maybe then you have a platform for saying what somebody meant to you, that you might not get the opportunity to say it beforehand. But if you were to look at interviews with a lot of today's top rock artists, and then you ask them who their influences were, you'd be surprised at how many have mentioned Lou Reed and the Velvet Underground through the years. So it really shouldn't come as a surprise.
Catherine Cole, VOA music blogger and program host, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
Moving on, October 31st was Halloween in the United States. It's a time for scary stuff, dressing up holiday, mostly for children, but adults get into it too, as they did when a Washington sports and social group mixed competition with costumes. VOA's Arash Arabasadi explains.
This game is called Skeeball.
So it's kind of like bowling, but a miniature version.
Skeeball is a game that most people play when they're children. We are grown children, so we continue to play it. We just switched from arcades to bars.
Skeeball is a sillier version of bowling.
It's like bowling, but each hole the ball goes into has a different point value. But if you think that's what tonight is all about, you are off the mark.
Dr. Ray's stance, Heart of the Ghostbusters, and these are my ghosts. Hi, Mom.
This night is one of 6 in a season.
It's Spirit Week, and it's Halloween, the great American tradition, or one of them at least.
Costume teams compete for a chance to win a $300 bar tab awarded to the best dressed squad. But these folks didn't need the incentive to dress up.
Well, it's Halloween. It's the one time you get to look ridiculous out in public and nobody judges you. So why wouldn't you take advantage of it, adults or child alike?
Taking a night off is what this holiday is all about.
Tonight, I am not a banker. I am a bar skier and a beer drinker.
You can do an alter ego. It's your one time of year that you can just act a fool without getting in trouble.
Organizers seem happy with the turnout. Dan Shank hosts the Skeeball tournament.
80% of the teams this week came out in some sort of costume, which is really nice to see. It gets everybody else in the bar excited. It gets other people wondering what's going on.
And that's the idea behind this Halloween soiree. Meet some people, share some drinks, play some games, and hopefully get some rest before the sun rises and they're back to their real lives. In Washington, I'm Arash Arabasadi for VOA News.
Well, we were so inspired by that story, we just had to do a little dressing up ourselves. And Ron, would you like to tell everyone what you are for Halloween here?
Well, I have no idea what this is. All I can say is that I look goofy, and I'm sure you guys are having a great time watching me. This was her idea. What's this?
You know, personally, I think you look great in orange.
Right,
I'm here, on the other hand, as one of the masquerade ball attendees from the Phantom of the Opera.
All right.
But actually, we should note that we are a little bit unusual with our Halloween costume picks because I have here that the top Halloween costumes for adults this year, number 1 is a witch, number 2, Batman, 3, vampire, and then 4 is a zombie. So we're going a little bit in a different direction here.
Alex's favorite character, zombies.
Oh yes, my favorite. No, gives me nightmares all the time. But but it's always fun to dress up for Halloween.
Oh yeah, you know, we do this every year, so we just wanted to do it again this year.
Exactly. And even though the holiday falls on October 31st each year, that doesn't stop us and many other Americans from celebrating well into November.
Well, unfortunately, our fun has to come to an end, but be sure to catch us again next week.
And if you just can't wait a whole week, check out our episodes and segments online on voanews.com, Facebook, and YouTube.
Well, thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you next time.